IndieWire posted their 25 best movies of 2019 video that their critic or their I don't know if, like, how senior he is in the on the outlet, but David Ehrlich, who I name drop quite a bit, he does this annual video where it's actually like the previous iterations are always very well edited. He does this very kind of evocative mix of music and clips from all the movies that have come out over the past year, and it's always very good choices. I found myself like agreeing with a lot of the rankings that he gave.
Mm-hmm. So what's number one?
Number one is A Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Okay. I am kind of disappointed that I got tickets to that for VIF, eh?
Oh, yeah.
And I wasn't feeling it that night, and I decided not to go, which turned out to be a really bad decision. I had heard like good buzz before, and I didn't know what it was about. But it's essentially an LGBTQ movie about two women who fall in love.
Yeah, in like the 18th century or something, right?
Exactly, yeah. So a woman's hired to do a portrait of another woman who's betrothed to this aristocrat, and she doesn't want to have any part of it. And so the artist and the subject of the painting end up falling in love, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
It just wasn't really up my alley, so I kind of skipped it, which now, in retrospect, was a terrible decision, but it seems like there's a very little consensus this year, which I find interesting. And we can talk about the Globes a little bit because there are some really big snubs and some really odd choices.
Yeah, so let's we'll get into that as soon as we get through with our intro there. So stay tuned for that.
Welcome to the 63rd episode of the Extra Buttery Podcast, a free-flowing conversation between two guys who love TV and movies. My name is Jason Chen, coming from Vancouver, and joining me is my host in Toronto, Robert Snow. Today we're going to talk about Knives Out, Marriage Story, and Watchmen. So stay tuned. But before we get to that, Golden Globes. What was the biggest snub for you?
I think The Farewell, or specifically Lulu Wang not getting a nomination for Best Director for The Farewell. I think that was...
Or any female director.
Yeah.
Like, what is Todd Phillips doing there?
I really don't know. I think we talked about how much I hate the Golden Globes this time last year, when the nominations came out. I
find it amusing.
I really don't understand why this one award show, and I'm sure there's somebody who's far more well-schooled in the art of like Hollywood history that can explain this to me, but if you're out there, please do. Why is it that this one award show whose awards are chosen by a group of like 80 or 90 foreign journalists in Hollywood gets this big gala, gets all this media attention, and we're left like talking about their wacko choices in terms of like category division and none of the picks, well, very few of the picks I would say, end up having any bearing on the rest of the awards races. It's such a strange outlier of a contest, and even the telecast is like a bit of a gong show every year because the guests are allowed to drink at their tables. So usually like the speeches and the sometimes even the hosts are like half in the can. But
I think that's the whole point. Like,
I guess
it's such a joke of an award show that people get hammered and just have a good time. I that's part of the appeal to me. I'm less interested in the winners. I can't even tell you who's nominated year in and year out. But I think there's something to be said about Hollywood people just letting loose a little bit, because I find the Oscars a very uppity and uptight sort of
that's true.
Ceremony. Yeah. But I just thought it was interesting, some of the choices they made. Baffling, sure. A little interesting.
Yeah, but you're right. Like Todd Phillips, like, if this were a normal directing contest, like something at the Oscars, admittedly it also has its faults. Everyone points that out. But to have a directing category that's like 5 white dudes is very boring and very like 5 years ago.
Well, not even just 5 white dudes. I'm generally okay with just 5 of the best directors. And if they happen to be 5 white men, then so be it. But clearly this year, it's not... The best 5 directors are not 5 white guys.
Yeah.
I think the ladies totally got snubbed. Lulu Wang, as you said. But at the same time, like, if you were to make a case for Todd Phillips, I don't know if you can make a really strong one in general. Like, the Joker, yes, it's very culturally significant in the sense that this is an R-rated movie that's done so well box office wise. But as a movie, as a message, as a think piece, I don't think it does anything else that we haven't seen before. I think it's very derivative.
Yeah, and you could, like, you know, what he's doing with the, you know, the Scorsese movies that he's referencing and the other, like, 70s stuff and 80s stuff. There's some people out there who kind of pointed out when the Joker came out that, you know, based on Todd Phillips' experience with the Hangover movies, where they're kind of like, one person said they're kind of ugly, small movies where not a whole lot happens and, you know, bad behavior is celebrated and this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And in a similar way, like, Joker kind of shares some of that worldview. So in that sense, like, maybe there's some artistry on the go there, but I still don't feel like, I feel like you could swap any number of other directors of Todd Phillips kind of caliber into that role on that movie and you would get a similar product.
Yeah, I think so. And my initial gut reaction wasn't this a guy who made one hit comedy and then did 2 sequels that were basically beat for beat the same goddamn thing?
Exactly.
So I'm not surprised that the Joker, I think, in its entirety lacked a lot of imagination. But speaking of directors who have a lot of imagination, Rian Johnson's Knives Out.
Are you baiting me, detective?
Attempting to be thorough so we can figure out the manner of death.
You mean if someone killed him? You think one of us, one of his family, killed him?
Mr. Blanc, I just buried my father who committed suicide. Why are you here?
I suspect foul play. I have eliminated no suspects.
Basically, we started talking about the conversation started on Twitter about the Golden Globes, and we ended up moving it off of the prying eyes of the internet and just into a Facebook Messenger thread. But we were talking with our friend Robin, who's been on the show before, and just talking about Star Wars, because of course that will be the main topic of the next episode, the final episode of this year. But about, you know, Rian Johnson and what he's like as a director and more of that Last Jedi backlash kind of stuff. But I am steadily becoming, if I wasn't already, a Rian Johnson fanboy.
You definitely
love
were.
The Last Jedi. And I love Knives Out. I gotta say it. I gave it like 5 out of 5 on Letterboxd. I had a great time. I can't think of any real gaping holes in that movie.
Well, we should add that this is a spoiler heavy episode.
Yes, yeah, that's true. So
if you haven't seen Knives Out, just turn this off and watch it and then come back and listen to us. Don't forget.
That or skip ahead. Use our handy timestamps that we put into the show notes of these episodes.
Exactly. We'll let you know. But I gave it 4.5 on Letterboxd, and the only reason I gave that was because the ending I felt a little short. I think the process, the actual investigation itself, the whole plot up until the last 20 minutes when Daniel Craig's character kind of cracks open the case, I think all that was fantastic. Yeah. I loved it. It was very much, as everyone else described it, a very much an Agatha Christie type whodunit. A lot of elements of Clue because the characters and the settings are so self-contained. It all basically takes place in one sort of mansion in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Usually with these whodunits, they come down with the hammer pretty fast and hard. I didn't get the sense in this movie, but again, I don't think they really needed it because...
Now by hammer, do you mean like the solution or...
Yeah, the solution, like the ultimate reveal.
Right.
And partly because of the way the movie's structured, that we kind of have an idea of what happened because we already have a prime suspect, what is it, like 20 minutes into the movie?
Yeah, maybe a bit longer, but there's there's a working theory that seems very strong and very believable, and it for a while it kind of feels like Johnson is trying to subvert the typical like Agatha Christie plotting by kind of like, it's also key. He's kind of taking a bit of a thing from Alfred Hitchcock's Rope, where the mystery is revealed, and then the question is like, how do we get to that point, or how do the investigators get there. Yeah.
And there's several scenes in there where Christopher Plummer, who's the murder victim, is playing with knives, and he's sort of making a reference to knives.
Yeah.
Which obviously lends to the title and the murder weapon itself. But there's a scene at the end where Chris Evans's character grabs one from his wheel of knives, which is really cool, by the way.
Yeah, I would like have that in my house, I think.
Do you?
If I had enough space, I would, yeah. that thing was super cool.
And he goes and tries to stab Ana de Armas, and it's a fake knife.
Yeah.
And that just kind of threw me for a loop. Like, it felt kind of gimmicky. Like, I know he's trying to subvert expectations, but that, in that moment, felt cheap. Because everything else in the movie was so carefully plotted out. It's like all of a sudden you have this element that comes into play that changes kind of everything. And you're kind of stuck wondering, well, why?
I see your point. I mean, you know, the movie goes from having like very deadly stakes to kind of having a bit of a joke worked into this climactic moment. But I also think that's kind of, that's still in keeping with the overall tone of it, because we aren't dealing with like a very super serious whodunit. There's elements of comedy, elements of satire of the genre in other parts of the movie too, you know, where Lakeith Stanfield, who plays a police detective who's kind of the local police officer who's helping with Daniel Craig's private investigation. You know, he points out after a bit of a car chase, he's like, well, that was the lamest car chase ever.
It's very self-referential, yes.
Yeah, so like those are the kind of fake out with the false knife at the end kind of feels like it's more part of that observational kind of bit of the movie.
Mm-hmm, right. But it's kind of like in a gunfight where all of a sudden like the main character has one last bullet, or, you know, they fire and it's empty all of a sudden at the most inopportune time.
Yeah, or there's somebody behind them who like kills them right before they can fire the killing blow or something.
Exactly. So that's how it felt to me.
Right.
But otherwise, I really loved it. I really think that this movie, in this sea of like genre bending above average movies, it's gonna get nominated for something because it deserves to be.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's got the fact that it's like an original story. I mean, granted, it's based on
somewhat original. Yeah,
I mean, it's based on a very like familiar genre and formula, but the fact that it's like it's not based on a novel, it's not based on any pre-existing IP, which is something we really don't see all that often these days. And it's got such a great balance of character. You know, despite having an ensemble cast, they keep the majority of the storytelling centered around like 3 or 4 main characters, and they don't get distracted with too many subplots.
Right. And I would, you know, pay a lot of money to see a Benoit Blanc sort of like mystery
spin-off Netflix show.
Or like another movie even, because I think he's a very funny character. I think Daniel Craig does a really good job with it. I think he's better than Kenneth Branagh's Hercule Poirot, to be honest.
I agree. Yeah. He's bringing more to the table, or at least more into like new stuff.
I agree. And it's just the character himself is just a lot more interesting. I think the performance was better. He's far more charismatic. I want to say it belongs in the Best Picture category, but I'm not convinced that this sort of genre really endears itself to critics and the Academy itself. I'd be kind of surprised if it got nominated for Best Picture, but I wouldn't be surprised if it got nominated for like Best Original Screenplay.
Yeah, it's got that
costuming.
vibe to it. Yeah,
exactly. It feels a little too, I don't want to say like shallow, but it just feels like a really good time, feel good movie that you kind of go see with your family. And these kind of movies where they don't really have a particular message, political or social, I don't think it just captures the Academy's attention like something like the freaking Green Book does.
Yeah. I mean, it's those social message movies, you know, they are the ones that tend to pick up the Best Picture, first the nominations and usually the actual award too. But I mean,
exactly.
I think, you know, as good as this movie is, and as like, you know, if I were the only person choosing the Best Picture nominees, let's say there was like
your dream world.
Yeah, if there were like 8 or 10, you know, which just seems to be the number that the category has kind of settled on over the past few years, I would put it in there. You know, if I were the one picking it, you know, I would. It's probably going to end up on my top 10 of the year. So,
me too.
You know, for me, even though it may not go home with like the big gold, as it were, I think it would deserve it in an ideal world.
I think we also talked about how Rian Johnson's very good and very eager about subverting expectations. And I kind of wrote this in my review. So even if you were kind of turned off by The Last Jedi, which I was, this is the perfect genre for him.
Yeah.
Because it forces you to twist and turn and question everything you know. So this is like the perfect vehicle for him.
He can also kind of like, now that he's kind of established, he's got a Star Wars movie under his belt. He's got this one, which is performing pretty well. I mean, he can assemble the kinds of like really great casts that can make material like this, that can kind of elevate this material, right? And gives you a reason to go.
By the way, Ana de Armas is having a killer couple years right now.
Yeah, and she's set to have like a killer like 2020 from what I can tell.
Yeah, she's just like nonstop working, but not even that. Like they're really big budget, big name productions that are getting a lot of positive buzz.
Yeah.
And her performance was really good. I was kind of skeptical to begin with, but she's got that like big-eyed sort of innocent look to her,
but there's an edge under there too, like she
there is. That's why you kind of question it, right? Because
you can see it coming out when her character feels threatened by the family, and and she's got her back against the wall, and that's when the knives come out. Ooh.
And at one point she even lies to the detectives, right?
Yeah.
So she's got this like gag reflex that forces her to be a very reliable narrator, but she's not reliable in the eyes of the other characters in the film, including the detectives, who are basically responsible for drawing all the conclusions. I thought that was a very clever element to have when you have a straight shooter, because a lot of these whodunits, one of the pitfalls is that none of the characters are reliable. So at the end, this sort of like Deus Ex Machina sort of like solution comes forth, and you're like wondering, like, where was this like 2 hours ago?
Right.
So Knives Out is the type of movie where I'm really eager to see it again, because I'm pretty positive when I watch it the second time, I could pick out all the things that clue into who actually, murdered Christopher Plummer. Well, speaking of like films that really catch the Academy's attention, Marriage Story is like right up their alley.
Charlie and I are getting a divorce, Mom. You can't be friends with him anymore.
Gee, Mom!
Charlie Bird! Mom! Mom? Mom! What?
Most people in my business, you're just transactions to them. I like to think of you as people.
Oh, okay, good.
You remind me of myself on my second marriage.
Noah Baumbach, Adam Driver, Scarlett Johansson, your trifecta with the indie director and the two leads, and it's just acting, right? Yeah. If you throw in Laura Dern and Ray Liotta in there, who are, by the way, the biggest scene stealers in that film.
Big time,
Yeah, and you have like domestic problems, screaming matches, emotional highs and lows. This is just like perfect. I wouldn't be surprised if this, by the time we get to the award season, like the Academies in February, I wouldn't be surprised if this movie got a lot of steam.
Oh yeah, and certainly in like all the big categories. I mean, this could be Adam Driver's year for Best Actor. It could be. I don't know that it's Scarlett Johansson's year, but she might get a nomination at least. I think
she deserves it.
I liked her in it. So the story follows a couple who were introduced to in the beginning with kind of dueling voiceovers. Set over like very kind of idyllic family kind of footage, where you see Adam Driver plays a successful independent theater director and playwright in New York, and he's married to a successful actor played by Scarlett Johansson, and together they have this young son. And when we first are introduced to them, it seems like they have a very like strong communication as a couple, and they share their parenting duties equally and all these things. But then we kind of smash cut to the fact that this sequence that opens the movie is actually them reflecting in couples therapy on the things that they value about each other. But apparently the couples therapy isn't going very well, because not too long after that, we discover that they're starting proceedings to get divorced. And they come into this divorce with all the best intentions in the world. They want to make it as easy as possible on their son. They want to try to live close to each other. They don't want to involve lawyers. They want to try to like work out something. But the movie kind of shows how even people with the best intentions in a difficult situation can be sort of radicalized or polarized even further by everything that goes into getting a divorce. And they slowly start to drift further and further apart. Things get more acrimonious until we get to like a very explosive final proceedings where, you know, full custody is up in the air, and you know, both parents are kind of wrestling with their decisions.
Yeah, and a lot of people will talk about how the performances really drive this film, and I totally 100% agree with them. I think if you didn't have Driver and Johansson putting in the performance they did, this is just a very infuriating movie about white middle upper class people and their stupid fights and their stupid divorces.
Yes, yeah.
Baumbach, I think for a while, didn't really get the praise he did when he did The Squid and the Whale, which is, in my opinion, a superior movie. But I think in this one, he's going to get a lot of praise for it, because with the way he directs, Adam Driver, I think, talked about the sort of the intensity that was required in this film. Mm-hmm. And granted, there are quite a few funny scenes, but for a talkie movie, it's pretty intense emotionally at times.
Yeah, especially this big blow up that Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson's characters have about like 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through the movie, where
the one where he pounds the wall.
Yeah, you start to get like really worried that something really bad's going to happen. But it is like you were saying, there are moments of levity in it, to the point where I actually found myself laughing a whole lot more than I expected. And it's probably the funniest movie about divorce. Well, like, with like divorce as the main kind of plot point. That I've ever seen.
Oh,
and
okay.
Not having gone through like any kind of divorce in my family, like on a real personal level, I don't have a huge amount of like investment in it. But even then, I could find myself kind of relating to the bureaucratic nightmare that this thing seems to be, and how like easy it is to kind of lose a grip on what you're trying to do.
It is different from other breakup movies in the sense that the two characters don't really have like new boyfriend / girlfriend that become sort of the focus of the film either. No. It's generally just about them two and their relationship and how they basically continue their lives after they get divorced. So that's pretty interesting, actually, now that you mention it, because most breakup movies just involve like the husband and the wife, the divorcees, sort of entering like a new, perhaps even better, usually better part of their lives. And this isn't necessarily the case for Marriage Story, which helps in its realism. I don't know if it actually is an uplifting movie.
No, well, I think it's bittersweet, you know, because you see how...
Yeah, bittersweet,
You see how, like, you know, they did have a very strong relationship at first, and I'm sure lots of people can identify with that, where, you know, one relationship or another might have lasted for 5 years, 10 years, or even more, and then all of a sudden it just kind of didn't make sense anymore. And I think a lot of people can identify with that, whether they were married or not. And you see how even when the relationship is fully over, how bits of their lives are still kind of entwined, you know, like you see how Adam Driver's character is really beloved by Scarlett Johansson's character's family. You know, he has a great relationship with his now former mother-in-law, and she gives him this huge hug on the same day that she's supposed to help deliver him with the actual divorce papers, serve him with the papers. And you see how, like, even with taking their family out of the picture, you know, Scarlett Johansson's character, she gets all these new job opportunities, including like some very promising work in the kind of streaming TV type of world. And there's a few funny like industry digs about like how much work there is, but how weird and high concept TV has become.
Right.
So there's some very like industry humor in there too that I really appreciate.
Well, industry lawyers too, right?
Yeah.
With how like these two really high powered lawyers represent celebrities, and they're pitting the two clients against each other, and just kind of like the cutthroat attitude that they have.
Exactly. And they're kind of like
casually cutthroat too, eh?
Oh yeah.
It's just like, this is how it is in LA.
Yeah.
Deal with it. Laura Dern was especially amazing, and Ray Liotta.
Do you think she's going to get Best Supporting Actress for that performance? Like she has that speech in her character's office where that is the clip that they'll play when she wins.
Yeah. I mean,
she wins.
Well, what's her competition, first of all? I think she deserves a nomination.
Probably a lot.
But but her screen time is quite limited in that film, even though she steals every single scene. And Alan Alda, too, right? He plays Adam Driver's first lawyer. So he was really good, too. I think it'd be tough to say. If she does get nominated, I don't see her winning. Just because the role itself, I don't think was meaty enough. Very rarely do you have an actor or actress win with limited screen time. I always come back to Silence of the Lambs, but I don't think any role since then has won for roughly 15 minutes of screen time.
Yeah, it's almost like it's always the roles that are kind of like challenging the best actor or best actress for like prominence in the story.
Right.
It feels like.
Can we talk about Scarlett Johansson's performance too for a sec? Just because I find her pretty wooden and cold, and I thought she was perfect for this role.
Because she was wooden and cold? Because I didn't find her particularly wooden, but...
Not wooden, but definitely cold.
Okay.
And definitely someone who gives off the vibe that she's like totally Hollywood.
This movie is like maybe the first time in a long time that I haven't seen her in some sort of like big box office type of thing. So... with Lost in Translation being kind of
right, fair enough.
To my mind, like the last time she had a big like indie movie role like this with this kind of like critical appraisal and popularity and stuff like that.
Have you seen Under the Skin?
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah, that's sort of in between too. But
well, she plays an alien, and it like the wooden aspect of her acting worked really well for that role too. So
I mean, maybe it's just kind of the characters that she feels most at home playing. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've never disliked her in anything. I don't particularly connect with Black Widow with that character in the Marvel movies. Although the trailer for the new standalone movie kind of changes my mind a little bit.
She's like terrifically boring action hero, Black Widow.
Yes. So, and I'm probably more interested in that movie for David Harbour and Florence Pugh, honestly, but whatever.
Of course.
We'll talk about that when we get closer to that movie coming out. But I think that she's well cast here, and she definitely leaves an impression, even if that impression is of a person who, I don't know, has a hard time being warm towards people or is a bit manipulative or something like that.
You do get the sense that she's a little uppity.
Yeah. And, there's some of again, getting back to like those industry digs, like some of the scenes where they kind of depict the very high-minded artsy fartsy stuff that her character was doing in New York with this like production of one of the, I think it's like Electra or one of those Greek tragedies where they're all the actors are kind of like carrying her in this choreographed dance, and then there's all this like howling avant-garde music and stuff like that. Like I found that pretty funny, but
because it's like it's making fun of theater, and it's a lot of like interpretive dancing that's just sort of being lampooned. Because Adam Driver is one of those, like, he plays one of those crazy directors where, like, he'll make someone do something 50 times and then all of a sudden be like, nope, not good enough. I'm going to change it completely.
Yes. Yeah. And a shout out to Wallace Shawn, who, doesn't do movies very often. I mean, people will remember him from The Princess Bride. He's pretty much exclusively like working in theater these days, but he pops up as like this veteran member of Adam Driver's character's theater troupe. And he just gets all these weird, off-putting one-liners and strange comments that again feels like a very sharp observation of the types of people that you find in the theater world.
I agree. I think that's probably more funny to you because you've actually worked and been in the theater world.
Yeah, I did some like community theater back in the day. So yeah, I know, I feel like I know some of these people.
I just think that there are certain stereotypes that come with stage theater people.
Yeah, for sure.
More so than like film actors. I think they're just like two completely different breeds.
Yeah, and well, it takes a certain level of like a certain type of person to kind of like put yourself out there in these like tiny productions with no money and just kind of
I agree.
Try to scratch out a living. Yeah. Just closing thoughts on Marriage Story. Like it played very briefly in theaters. It's on Netflix now, so highly recommend you check it out in advance of the nominations and the award season ramping up, because I feel like it's going to start to build a head of steam.
But you know what is good though?
Watchmen?
Yes.
I love you.
We just met. When did you fall in love with me?
I was already in love with you.
Before you even saw me?
I don't experience the concept of before.
So, there's no moment?
Moment?
A moment when you realize I'm in love.
This is the moment.
So I haven't been watching any of this, so I'm just going to try to go like as light on spoilers as you can, because I do feel like I'm going to circle back and watch this one, because I keep hearing fantastic things about it.
Yeah, you have to. Just because Damon Lindelof is a guy who tends to write a lot. He has a lot of interesting ideas that just never go anywhere, and he just kind of leaves you hanging. But this season of Watchmen, which he intended to be just a one-off, is very well plotted out. There are things that happen in the beginning few episodes where you kind of wonder what direction he's going, but the payoff is there. And so that's good.
Right.
So we are at episode 8, which aired last December 8th on a Sunday. And we are one episode away from, or the next episode is the finale. We're quickly wrapping things up. And I don't want to give too many things away, but I will say that even if I told you some elements of the plot in this most recent episode, it wouldn't even make sense anyway, because you really have to start from the beginning, because so much of the story revolves around things that have happened in the 20 years since the attack on New York.
Oh, yeah.
Things revolve around Adrian Veidt, Ozymandias, who is this like really mysterious character who has like an army of clones. And I won't say anything more than that. Yeah, and it's funny the way he treats them. And then there's also Dr. Manhattan, who, as we all know, experiences time differently from every other character. He is both the past, present, and future. And I think the show did a really good job, especially the most recent episode, of really showcasing that. I think it takes a lot of skill to move so seamlessly between so many different eras and point of views. As we talked with Robin, this show is really bold in its politics, in its depiction of white versus black, in its depiction of racism, in turning some of the most sort of common thoughts we have about vigilantes and the people underneath their mask and turning it on their head. I don't think it's very heavy-handed so far. I think a lot of the themes that he has in this season involving, conflict and love and alternate history really manages to inhabit the world that the original creators of Watchmen, Gibbons and Moore, had envisioned. I know Alan Moore has sort of become, for good reason, become a bit of a curmudgeon, a bit of a staunch critic of all the superhero stuff that's going on right now. I don't know. I feel like if he really gave this series a chance, I think he would see some value in it, because it goes just beyond just the basic good versus evil arguments that we get in a lot of these superhero TV shows.
Right. And it seems like there's always been an extra element of commentary in the Watchmen universe. And, there's, I think we were talking about this when you first started watching the show. There's a pretty big burden on this show to kind of, not just do what both the movie and the comic did, but kind of extend it in a way that makes sense.
That's right. My only gripe is that there's a character in the show, Jane Crawford, and she's the wife of a police chief, and she's played by Frances Fisher, who to me looks a lot like the woman who plays Laurie Blake, Jean Smart. They both got that pale skin, big eyes, and they got the curly sort of strawberry blonde locks going on. And there's a scene where they're sitting face to face, and Laurie Blake, aka Silk Spectre, is kind of interrogating her and presenting her this theory of what she thinks has happened throughout the events of the show. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, these are just like mirror characters of each other. And not only that, I didn't feel that Jean Smart really relates to the Silk Spectre I know. I have to say, though, the Silk Spectre I know more intimately is the one from Zack Snyder's film.
Oh, yeah, the Malin Ackerman.
Yes, Malin Ackerman and Carla Gugino from the movie. So I'm less familiar with the Silk Spectre in the comics, but there's and the show itself is based more on the comic than the movie, although it acknowledges some of the stuff that's happened in the movie. I just think that there is a bit of a disconnect there. But we'll have to see in the final episode what happens, because there's so many questions I had throughout the viewing of the show that Lindelof manages to answer. So that's where the payoff comes. It's not like Lost or even Prometheus it was, right? Where he just wrote a bunch of stuff, see what's stuck on the wall and just kind of left it.
Yeah.
And you're going, what the hell, man? So maybe he does do that in the season finale. I hope not. I'm very optimistic because so far the show has been so good.
Yeah. And like, now to me, this seems like the first superhero show or vigilante show that is getting like serious attention from critics and like the industry more broadly. It kind of feels like the first one of these TV shows in this genre that might like be a contender for some Emmys.
Oh, maybe.
Because, like other superhero shows that we've seen recently, like big superhero shows, we had the Marvel's Defender series, Daredevil and Luke Cage and all those.
Yeah, it was only half of it was good.
Those were the first time that we were seeing like big superhero shows on a platform like Netflix get a lot of critical attention. And, meanwhile, the CW has been doing their thing with the Flash and the Arrowverse and all that stuff. But all of those shows seem like they're more kind of like entertainment, very
family friendly,
deliberately cheesy, kind of that they're very self-aware with like the low budgets and that kind of stuff. And admittedly, they get a lot of mileage for their low budgets. But no, this seems like the first time that there's like a big prestige show in the superhero genre that's kind of getting this kind of like, yeah, this is actually like top tier television kind of thing.
Exactly. And I keep going back to episode 6, I think it was. That's just incredible TV where they reveal the origins of Hooded Justice, which is something that riffs off the original comic and film, because the identity of Hooded Justice and the first Minutemen was always kind of never really discussed.
Yeah, doesn't he usually, that character just kind of appear in like old photos?
Yeah, so there are rumors and stories about him, Hooded Justice, being gay with Captain Metropolis and how he was maybe an ex-wrestler and blah, 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 blah. But this show actually just takes it to a whole nother level and creates this whole canon, I guess. It would be canon of the real Hooded Justice. But HBO is really great because it's not bound to a lot of the cable TV rules in regards to like violence, social commentary. So HBO can really push the boundaries, just as Watchmen, the graphic novel, really pushed boundaries when it was first published. So HBO is, I think, the perfect vehicle, and all the other specialty cables too, like Showtime, Stars, whatever. These shows can do things that a lot of other quote unquote mainstream and generic superhero shows just cannot.
Yeah.
A lot of these made TV CW type superhero shows, they throw you a villain who's clearly evil. Maybe he's an interesting villain because his goals are somewhat noble, kind of like Thanos. But at the end of the day, it boils down to good versus evil. Whereas in HBO and Watchmen, it really makes you question what makes a good person, or what makes a person a good guy, so to speak, in the fight against evil.
Yeah, and that's exactly like, if you think about the last time that HBO got lots of like great critical notices in a kind of like geeky or fantasy type of zone, and that was Game of Thrones, when it was at its high point. And again, that I think one of the reasons that show hit big in the way that it did at the time that it did was it presented a more geeky property, fantasy property, in those shades of gray and didn't go too much on the like black and white, very simplistic dichotomy between the characters.
Speaking of the show, by the way, Regina King not getting nominated is like a travesty. I think she's so good. She's clearly the heart and soul of this show. She does so much as both a mass vigilante and as a mother and as a wife, and she plays so many different roles in this series, and she knocks it out of the park. I'm really disappointed that this show wasn't acknowledged more at the Golden Globes, but hopefully that changes soon.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you're going to be talking about TV, you might as well be talking about the Emmys, because this Globes business, I just
you just can't get over it.
No.
I just find it amusing. I think it's so funny that it's all over the place, and it's so predictable too. Like I was looking this up today. It's like in the past 20 years, only 4 times have female directors been nominated. And twice it was Catherine Bigelow, and the other one's Sofia Coppola for Lost in Translations. The other one's Ava DuVernay for Selma.
Right.
So it has a history of being like this, and you just hope that over time that they kind of rectify this situation. Because
except they can't really rectify it in the way that the Oscars are, because again, you're dealing with this like completely ridiculous disparity in like voting body. You've got 4,000 or more, however many thousand of Oscar voters, which they've made a very deliberate campaign of in recent years to diversify, whereas you got like 80 or 90 journalists who choose the Globes.
Right. But I'm saying these 80 or 90 journalists who make picks for the Globe might change. And so
you would hope. Yeah.
I mean, they can't stay working forever. I mean, some of them have to die at some point, right? Or retire. So you hope that change does come. I'm not super hopeful, and I'm not entirely convinced the Academy has changed, because of all the goodwill they did was completely washed away with the Green Book.
I wouldn't say it was washed away, but it definitely took a hit. Yeah, it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of situation.
Yeah, one big, huge step back. I thought that was such an egregious error in judgment. Oh my God, I was dumbfounded.
I will definitely hearing the nonstop positive praise for Watchmen, I'm definitely going to
now I feel like I built it up too much.
Well, maybe yes, maybe no, but I'll at least I at least know that it's worthy of adding to my watch list. It's something that I might have to make a bigger effort to seek out.
But definitely give it a chance.
But then looking ahead to the next couple of episodes here on the podcast, of course, a lot of you will anticipate that our next episode will fall, a few days after the release of Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker.
Ooh.
So, of course, I would say, if not a big chunk of that next episode, if not the whole episode, will probably be dedicated to that one movie. So, if you're not a Star Wars fan, sorry, but not sorry.
But you have to listen to it, because it's the end of the Skywalker saga.
For now, until there's no hard and fast rules in Star Wars. What are we talking about here? They can go back, and if they can delete all of the expanded universe stuff, they can, make up a new rule about however many more Skywalker movies.
I can guarantee right now that the whole episode will be about Star Wars.
Okay, yeah. So just prepare yourself for that. Maybe you're the kind of person who you just love to hear us talk about stuff, and you don't know anything about Star Wars, but you'll learn a little bit from our total nerd out.
Yeah. At which point I'm like, do you live under a freaking rock? How can you not know about Star Wars? But we both have very different thoughts about Star Wars, I think, and very different experiences through Star Wars growing up. So I think that'll be a really interesting conversation. So that comes out next week, December 16th. I'm pumped for it. I don't know how.
Oh no, it comes out on the 20th. So it'll be
20th, sorry.
So the episode will probably be if not the week of Christmas, maybe the last weekend of the year, and then getting into January, of course, we'll have had a chance post Star Wars to catch up on some of the other soon to be Oscar contenders. Hopefully Jason will have a chance to see Uncut Gems. I'll probably be catching up on a few of the things that I haven't seen yet, and we'll probably be able to pull together a more confident top 10 of 2019 ranking for each of us.
Oh. So we are going to do one then.
I mean, I don't know. I don't want to sound too confident here, because it's going to be hard. I mean, we'll do a top 20.
Well, top 20 is a bit like too broad. Top 15 maybe, but I don't think it has to be in any specific order.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I can agree to that.
Yeah, just a list of the top 15, and then maybe we can debate and whittle it down to maybe top 3 or 4 movies, because there's a lot of good films out there, and a lot of them, like The Lighthouse, for example, wasn't very accessible to a lot of viewers.
True, yeah. And it's especially in this day and age where, like, you know, especially with like a Netflix or an Amazon thing, you know, stuff is harder to see in theaters, and
right.
You know, all of these other platforms competing for everyone's attention, you know, some of this stuff can fall between the cracks. So yeah, it's you kind of have to make a bit of a almost like a concerted effort these days to really like track down some of this stuff.
Anyway, I think this is a good spot to end our episode.
Yep. So like we said, look forward to our next episode on Star Wars. But while you're waiting for that, head on over to kinetoscope.ca, where we have Jason's review of Knives Out, and we'll be posting more reviews, more content over the course of December, as well as the Rise of Skywalker review, which I'm looking forward to writing. And until the next episode, my name is Robert Snow in Toronto.
And my name is Jason Chen in Vancouver. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.